Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of Livewire. I am your host, Jared Moore, and Livewire is the program where we take your questions from the chat. On tonight's program, we're going to be talking about a new sovereign brief that was published by the Native Nations Center for Tribal Policy Research at the University of Oklahoma. And we'll be speaking with Tana Fitzpatrick, who is the director of that center and also the author of this report. Tana, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I guess to start off with, Tana, my first question would be, what is the purpose of this sovereign brief? What are you guys trying to achieve with this? And then also, what was some of the research that was done that went into this report?
Yeah, great question. I think the Native Nation Center for Tribal Policy Research, we're still a growing institute. We've been producing research for about a year. And I have an interest in artificial intelligence, and we had been putting on programming involving artificial intelligence. We had a podcast that we released in December on data centers, just having conversations. And as part of those conversations with people in the room and with tribal partners, a lot of asks came to us, hey, since you're talking about it, can you tell us more about data centers? And so that got me thinking, and I got curious, and I thought, well, what is going on out there? I had authored one report previously in September of a year ago almost, on artificial intelligence in general. What are policy trends happening from the international level to United States down to the state level? And just seeing if there's anything there that might be helpful for tribes to consider, regardless of how they feel about or whatever approach they might have around artificial intelligence. So I took that same framework of thinking about it and applied that to data centers. So that's where I started looking at, what is Congress doing? What are they saying about this? What are some of the actions that they're taking? What is the executive branch doing in the federal government? Mm-hmm. What are some of the policy stances that they're doing, executive orders, all the way down to what are some of the agencies doing? What some steps are they taking? And then, of course, it's just too comprehensive to do all 50 states. But I did my research around, can I see any trends? Can I see any themes coming even out of the state level too? And so that was some of the research that went into the sovereign brief.
And what are some of those trends that you noticed?
You know, it was really interesting because I want to say I'm not a tech person at all. I don't know how to build a data center. I barely know what a server is. But I have spent my career supporting tribal decision makers, whether that's either as an attorney working directly inside a tribe or with the federal government, either working in policy or in legal spaces, always on tribal issues. And so I know I can support governing decision making. And so I just got curious, and like I mentioned, and so some of the trends I saw, which really to me was really fascinating, and then as I was looking at it, it just seemed so obvious. But one of the things that I looked at that seemed to be at top of mind, probably I would say towards later 2025, early 2026, and probably still continuing, is what are the impacts to ratepayers, meaning anyone who's paying for electricity, because energy goes into computing artificial intelligence, which is why these big data centers are needed. Data centers have been around for a long time, but these massive footprint data centers are new to support artificial intelligence. And so that the energy aspect is where a lot of activity was kind of popping out of the research that I was doing, and what sort of action sovereigns were taking to either get a handle on that or regulate it or oversee it. So that was one of the things that really popped out to me.
I see. And you guys, there's a link to the brief in the description of this video, and I also encourage you to go to the Native Nations Center's website and check out all the stuff they have. There's a lot of media and things there. And we covered a previous sovereign brief that came out about cancer treatment, if you guys remember that Livewire. So, you know, you mentioned we were talking about the the rates, the electricity rates. And that's a big concern that I hear from a lot of citizens and people in the chat all the time, is this is going to make the electricity rates go up. And then on the news and various coverage, you will see that states or federal agencies are saying, well, we're going to create a requirement that these companies that build these data centers have to pay for their influence on the power grid or something. Somehow they're going to fix that rates. And in your research that you did, my question is, how do they do that? Because to me, it seems like more just like an economic question of, if demand increases, the price goes up, and there's no way that the demand doesn't go up because there's going to be an AI data center there. So what did you find when you looked into that?
Yeah, and in some of those more technical pieces on energy and electricity, the grid, those are also over my head. But what I can tell you is the different approaches that kind of came out of my looking at this. So some of the things that you're describing, I saw in, like for instance, I'll give like a range. So there was in 2020, I think it was earlier this year actually, where President Trump was producing policies that said, hey, wait a minute. I know we said we want to be like the front runner on this artificial intelligence thing, but hey, industry, meaning those who are building data centers, we need to not do it to the detriment of our citizens and how much they're paying for energy. Citizens shouldn't be footing the bill for. That's kind of the common sentiment. Citizens shouldn't be footing the bill for these data centers. They should be footing it themselves. So that came out in a national policy. But then some of the states that I'm seeing were passing laws that say, hey, they're trying to regulate industry. So they're whatever composition of words they put into the law says, if you're going to build here, we need to know more about noise. We need to know about air, water quality. We need to know about, if you're going to build, give notice. I think that was an Oklahoma one. Give notice to the surrounding people that are around you. So they're doing all of these different activities to legal law producing activities to try to get a handle on the data centers and building them out. And that can include also, you need to tell us how much the electricity, all of the different things that go into the electrical grid when a data center is going up. And so I know one of the common themes was if there's a blackout on the grid, all of that shouldn't go towards the data center to keep it going. It should make sure that we're taken care of. So, and I don't know the finer, like how that actually happens on the ground, but I know that the laws that's what they were trying to protect in some places.
So we've also seen, and this is just from our coverage at Mvskoke Media, and it's mentioned in the brief that there was an attempt to do a data center here and citizens protested it and didn't want it, and then that legislation got pulled. So, and then I don't know, it may come back in the future again, but what can tribes do if the citizens of those tribes say, we don't want data centers on the reservation or on any tribally owned land? What steps can the tribes take? That's some of those recommendations are in this brief, right?
Yeah, and the point of the brief, and actually anything that we write at the Native Nation Center, is to give that range of options. So we don't take a position. We're objective, we're neutral, we're nonpartisan, and we really try hard we do rigorous review on our information so that we are unbiased. And so one of the common themes because of that is we really focus on each tribal nation's sovereignty. So one tribe might say moratorium, we're never going to consider this ever. Another tribe might be more open to it. Maybe they're interested in the economic development aspect of it. Maybe that's one of their only prospects and they have the land for it. I don't know. I'm just giving we tried to make sure that we considered all possible considerations for tribes which is 575 across the United States. So a lot of different positions out there. But to your point, I would actually say this is probably something that happens and is happening across states, state citizenry, the United States citizenry, grappling with what are the citizens saying. So I don't know that it's unique to Indian country. This is probably a global iteration. And so one of the things in the Sovereign Brief mentions, because there is this, how would you put it, this regular occurrence of citizens saying, absolutely not, we don't want them in our backyard. What are sovereigns doing? And so considering public engagement within your own communities and incorporating what their feedback is. Some of the things I've seen since I've just been keeping my eyes on this is, some citizens being very much adamant. It's drawing on our resources. It's air contamination. What happens to this massive building once you don't need it anymore? And then there's already the footprint on the land. To others saying, and then of course the data sovereignty piece, which was not covered in my Sovereign Brief, because I think that's its own special, it deserves its own attention in this space of artificial intelligence. But from that viewpoint but we also see there's advances being made in artificial intelligence, and there might be opportunities there that might be useful for tribal consideration. And so I think one of the things that the Sovereign Brief tries to put in there is to consider what it means to tribal decision making, to incorporate what their citizens and their constituents are saying about the issue. And that's going to look different depending on where the tribe is. And
absolutely. So we've had a question pop in here, and I want to remind you guys watching out there, if you have a question, you can pop it into the chat. Freshfin72 asks, what way do most Mvskoke people lean to, blue or red? And I would just say that it runs the whole gamut, blue, red, independent, every which way. I don't know if there's ever been any type of survey or anything that shows it's mostly Republican, Democrat, or otherwise. In my personal experience, I've experienced, like, all Mvskoke citizens have every type of political view you could imagine. I don't think there's a unified position from all tribal members as far as their political affiliation. Just to answer that question that popped up in there. Tana, one of the things that we have seen at the Creek Nation, but also generally with municipalities and stuff, is non-disclosure agreements, and this is not just with data centers, but data centers has really brought it to the front, where councils or city councils, tribal councils, tribal officials are signing these NDAs before they have any legislation and everything, just to discuss whether they're going to do a contract with a company. And I know that was mentioned in your brief too. Could you tell us a little bit about what your research saw?
Sure, yeah, that came up because of the concerns for lack of transparency in what's being discussed there, and how can this is also an issue I've seen in the state engagement as well. How can we have a say in what's going on when we don't even know what you're talking about? And then when we did the podcast, we had someone in there who had worked in artificial intelligence in the industry. He's a professor, he's faculty now at the University of Oklahoma. And he immediately knew that the NDAs, that's what these companies require just to talk about it, because all of their private information and how they think about things, they don't want, that's their reasoning. Part of their reasoning, I'm thinking, is for wanting to enter an NDA so that their intellectual property isn't being discussed just publicly. I'm guessing. So that came up quite a bit, and some of the states that I reviewed were some of the proposals in legislation was saying we want there to be transparency when there's NDAs. So they were looking more at approaching it as an oversight, governing approach when those kinds of conversations are being had.
I see. So with the brief, and I encourage you guys to check out the brief. There's a link in the description here if you want to click it and check it out after the show's over or during the show or whatever in another browser window. Is there anything that came out of your research that got into the brief that maybe you didn't expect, you had never seen before?
I mean, I feel like this is also new, so it's almost like everything I hadn't seen before. What was interesting to me is because we're so new at this type of and level of research and analysis and trying to gear it towards Indian country and assisting in just being that extra layer of support for decision making, to help inform decision making. And so that was a challenging part for me in how to approach this piece. So some of the interesting things to me, I guess, from like a federal government level was kind of how sprawling the activity was from like the executive branch. There, of course, if you've paid any attention to what's going on the national level for data centers only or artificial intelligence, there's probably, I can't even count right now because I didn't cover all of the artificial intelligence executive orders, but there's a lot just in 2025 alone, and then more in 2026. And so what I did was analyze all of those for anything talking about data centers. And I looked at what were the common themes. That's in the Sovereign Brief. What are some of the common themes, and how many laws does this possibly cover? At least 12 federal laws are implicated. How many agencies? There are at least 8 federal agencies covered who are charged with following through on what these executive orders were requiring, or these national policy plans were requiring in the national AI framework. There's at least one White House counsel that was included. And so what was interesting to me was kind of that level of coordination across the federal government. And that was what's made it difficult for me, was how do I concisely talk about this when I'm having to review this and like try to keep track. Mm-hmm. How can tribes keep track, or maybe even the common day, everyday U.S. citizen? That's a lot to kind of mm-hmm. keep on top of. And then to switch over and compare with what was Congress was doing. And as far as data, I thought I was going to see way more laws being proposed on data centers, and I didn't. And I tried to really tried hard to be as, try to grab as many possibilities as possible. And I only found between February 2025 and February 2026, oh my gosh, I'm testing my remembrance on my Sovereign Brief right now. It was like 10 or something. And even within them, there were still themes of, being more focused on energy and ratepayers. But greenhouse gases came up in some of those proposed bills. And when I was looking at it, tribes had only been mentioned once. A couple have been proposed since I authored that do involve tribes, but that, to me, I wouldn't say it was a surprise. Tribes aren't often at the forefront of the minds of federal decision makers when something like this, that's not inherently directly an Indian country issue. It takes a lot to have us be elevated to that level and remember to be included in some of these activities that are happening at the federal government. But I guess it was interesting we were included in one law, that I reviewed. So there's that.
Absolutely. So we had a question pop up here, and I don't know if we'll be able to answer it here, but we'll give it a go. Freshman72 is asking, what data are these centers storing? Could you give us kind of like in a general way how does these hyperscale data centers, what are they doing, as far as in conjunction with AI?
Okay, I'll do my best. Again, I'm not the tech person, but this is my elementary knowledge of it. Any data center is a building, and inside that building is just racks of servers. And whatever the technology in those servers is, that's where the data is stored. And for the AI data centers, in the sovereign brief, I call them AI data centers. There's not really a landed on description for these centers. So some industry calls them hyperscale centers. They're massive, way bigger than data centers of the past. And sometimes they're called new load, or I think it's front load data centers when you're thinking mostly about the energy aspect of what goes into these data centers. But they're humongous and have that much more servers in them. And because those servers run hot, they're always processing and storing information. It requires something to cool them off, which typically has been water. And that's where that water component comes in.
I see. So we are at 20 minutes, and we normally wrap before 30 minutes. So is there anything about the brief that you'd like to mention before we get out of here that we haven't talked about already?
I think that, 575 tribes, I know there's, we're here with Mvskoke Media. Every tribe's going to have their different approaches. And I think what strikes me is, if I were to leave a lasting thought for a tribe or a tribal leader, I think, thinking about this can be overwhelming, especially when tribes have so many other things that are happening right now: healthcare, housing, MMIP, all of these like real world, we need to do this now. Mm-hmm. And artificial intelligence and data centers, data centers to me is like the physical aspect of artificial intelligence. Otherwise, it just kind of feels like it's kind of floating out there. But to the extent that a tribe is concerned and wants to know more, just being curious and learning more for themselves. But also, if they want to start considering what their approach is, are they for, are they against, are they don't know, are they in the middle? I think kind of having more of like I guess for lack of a better phrase, a strategic planning, like what are we? And maybe that includes citizen engagement. Maybe as a whole, it's hard to get consensus among so many people, but I think you would probably see some common themes about where your community wants to go, or maybe they just want to know a little bit more. And so maybe before you make decisions, there could be task force. I think you all just recently established one specific to data centers, but there's task force. You can include whoever you want on those task force, cultural experts, academia. There's someone at OU I'm sure I could recommend, educators, policymakers, attorneys, all sorts of things, just to get more knowledge so that you can make an informed decision. And then from there, some of those decisions can include maybe complete moratorium. And I maybe just saying moratorium isn't enough. Maybe just one law saying it isn't enough. Maybe you scan and see where else can we tighten this up to know that this is just, we're not for this. Or if you're interested and you want to learn more, or you say, yeah, maybe your tribe that has the land and you want to invite in a data center. Same thing. Looking at the laws, looking at what your policy stance is going to be, and maybe across the board you still say we want transparency in those NDAs, but you make it fit for you depending on what your tribe is interested in. AI might be new, but tribal governance is not. There's always been this. We've always been able to figure it out for ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, Tana, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it, and I love what you guys at the center are doing. I don't know if you can tell us what's coming next, but do you guys have a brief on the horizon anytime soon?
We do. So hopefully in short order, who you spoke to back in, I think, February or March, Grace Fox, she's going to be producing a report on the IHS and the ITU system. So that should be forthcoming the next month, I hope.
All right, great. Well, we'll have Grace back on the program. We'll talk about that whenever that report drops. And you guys, I encourage you to check out the center's website and also the report in the description of this video. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight and asking all the great questions. And we'll see you again next time. Mado Hadam, Chihichat, Lise.